Welcome to tonight's planning application meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone present to this meeting in the Civic Centre and to those observing the meeting on Microsoft Teams. Fire alarms procedure. There are no fire drills expected this evening, so in the event of an alarm sounding, please quickly make your way out of the building. There are 3 exits from this room, which members can use to vacate the premises. Please switch mobile phones onto silent or switch them off and take any calls outside of the meeting room. Do not leave any possessions unaccompanied and/or report any unaccompanied possessions. Remember to take any possessions with you when the meeting is concluded or as you leave the meeting. This meeting may be subject to filming or audio recording by others in accordance with the Council's filming protocol. Anyone who remains in the meeting following this announcement will have deemed to have consented to allow their image to be recorded and broadcast. On to the agenda, item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Ansah. Councillor Stendhal will be substituted for Councillor Ansah.
Thank you. Are there any other apologies? No? Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? I've got a few. Councillor Stendhal?
Yes, item 6. While I'm listed in the report, I consider that I'm here tonight with an open mind. So,
Thank you, June. Councillor Jackson?
Yes, thank you. That item is in my ward. I shall be speaking as ward councillor, so I shall be abstaining from the debate and the vote on that item.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Moxon?
On a similar vein to Jackson, so where to state it is at the moment, and also is involved in talking to residents about this in the local area and getting them to support it. So I don't feel that it could be seen that I have an open mind on it. So your permission, Chair, I'd like to speak on the item and then not take any further part and won't vote on it.
Yeah. Any other declarations of interest? No. Thank you. Move on to item 3, minutes of the last meeting. We have a proposer and seconder. Councillor Hammersley and Councillor Stevenson. Any amendments for accuracy? No. Can I have a vote then, please, to accept the minutes? Any abstentions? Any against? That's carried, thank you. Move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is planning application. Get the right paper. Planning application reference 2025-0149, outline application for residential development up to 52 in number dwellings, the former Sherwood Hall School playing fields, Stewart Avenue, Forest Town. And could I ask the officer to make a report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The application seeks outline planning permission for residential development of up to 52 dwellings. Then the only matter for determination today is the principle of development and the access. All other matters, including appearance, layout, landscaping and scale, are reserved. The application has been brought to committee because it's a major development and there are more than 16 objections. In terms of updates since the publication of the report, Nottinghamshire County Council have provided an updated response in respect to bus stop improvements contribution. In the report, it states that they require 43,200 and this needs to be increased to 48. A further 2 neighbour responses have been received since the publication of the report. These raise the following matters. It was asked whether there was a conflict of interest with the applicant of the proposal working for Nottinghamshire County Council. We replied to that email advising that NCC can submit applications to Mansfield District Council as we are the local authority. And the application is not to be determined by NCC. We've also been asked how the yield of education figures have been arrived at and who will monitor this, and what are the mechanisms, restrictions that are in place to prevent, for example, 52 children, as they have witnessed examples of the restrictions being bypassed. The predicted demand for places generated by the proposed development is calculated using a formula within the council's SPD. So for every 100 dwellings built, there will be 21 pupils of primary school age, 16 pupils of secondary age generated, and this has been the adopted formula used by the council for calculating contributions, and it corresponds with the yields which are used by the county council to forecast demand for places in Nottinghamshire. In response to the question as to whether there is a mechanism to control the number of children, there isn't, and it would be unreasonable to do so. We were also asked whether there was an error in the report because it mentioned Tudor Avenue, the bus stop in relation to Tudor Avenue, stating that standard buses cannot access Tudor Avenue unless a minibus is being used. There is bus stop which are titled Tudor Avenue are opposite and adjacent to Tudor Avenue. There are no proposals to change the bus stop routes or provide a minibus as part of the proposal, and it's not considered necessary or reasonable to do that as part of the proposal. So the site is approximately 2.9 hectares. It comprises the former school playing fields and disused tennis courts. It's not been used as playing fields for over 14 years, following the demolition of the former Sherwood Hall School. The surrounding character is predominantly residential, with Abbey Primary School to the west and Stewart Avenue bounds the site to the north. There are no public rights of way across the site, although informal access is occurring through gaps in the fencing. And you can see on the Google Earth image that there are paths that people have been walking, and we have got some photos as well of where they are gaining access into the site. So the proposal seeks outline planning permission for 52 dwellings. It's served by a singular vehicle access point from Pumpoller Lane. The indicative layout includes 2 areas of green space. A sustainable drainage solution is shown indicatively on the layout plan that you can see, and there's an indicative path around the drainage pond which provides a pedestrian link into Pumpoller Lane path. A 3-metre high fence is proposed along the southern boundary where the site adjoins the school, and the existing hedges to remain. Part of the site is to be retained by Nottinghamshire County Council in connection with a proposed parking alleviation scheme. That's the white area in the red line, which you can see on the plan. This does not form part. This scheme doesn't form part of this application. The indicative housing mix, although it's not for determination at this stage, the layout shows 3-bed detached dwellings, 18 2-bed units, and 6 homes would be affordable, which will be secured via Section 106. All statutory consultees have raised no objection, apart from Sport England, who have objected to the proposal. So they've objected relating to the loss of the former playing field. And even though they consider it to not have been used for 14 years, they still object to the proposal. But given that it's not been used for 5 years, it's not considered as a statutory objection, and it wouldn't have to be referred to Secretary of State if we were to approve the application today. Neighbouring residents have raised a number of concerns which are set out in the agenda across pages 14 to 18. In terms of the principle of development, The site sits within the Mansfield urban area, so in policy terms, it's considered to be a sustainable location where we expect new housing to come forward. Policies S1 and S2 support development in this area, so the principle of development is considered acceptable. In response to the Sport England objection, the former playing field use ceased approximately 14 years ago, following the former school being demolished in 2011 after a fire. There's no evidence on the site of any marked pitches, goalposts, or maintenance of the land, and the land comprises rough grassland. It is informally used by members of the public for general recreation, but this doesn't equate to formal pitch provision. So even though although in use, the playing pitches retain their status as playing fields, and therefore required to be assessed as to the acceptability of their permanent loss. The council's playing pitch strategy remains the most up-to-date evidence, and this identifies that these pitches are surplus. The school that replaced Sherwood Hall now have modern playing pitches of their own, and on that basis, the proposal meets national planning policy requirements around the loss of playing field land. The site also sits within a wider strategic green infrastructure area, but importantly, it's not designated as open space and it's not formally accessible to the public. The development gives us the opportunity to improve things. It brings with it proper footpaths, managed open space, landscaping and ecological enhancements, which overall strengthen the corridor rather than harm it. And in this respect, it's considered that the proposal meets the objectives of policy IM1. A number of concerns have been raised regarding the impact on the development on highway safety, including congestion in the area, especially at school pick-off and drop-off, and that the parking scheme alleviation does not form part of the proposal. Access to the site will be taken from a new priority junction located on Princess Avenue and Pump Lane. The Highways Authority has assessed the proposal and the predicted vehicle movements has no objection to the proposal. The concerns raised about school time congestion have been considered and traffic counts were undertaken at the time of the school run. The parking alleviation scheme mentioned by residents is separate and is not required to make this development acceptable. Advice from NCC Highways is that the school is a problem but not as a result of this development and is unlikely to be made materially worse as a result of this proposal. We consider that the proposal is therefore consistent with both national and local policy in this respect. The photo on screen shows you where the access point is going to be taken from. In terms of residential amenity, the layout before you is indicative, so it's only one way that the site can be developed. The detailed relationships with neighbouring properties will be considered at the reserve matters stage, but based on the number of units and the size of the site, it is considered that there is no reason 52 dwellings couldn't be accommodated without harming existing residential amenity. The noise levels for the future occupants has also been assessed in a noise impact assessment and found to be acceptable. It's not considered that the development would result in an acceptable impact in terms of environmental nuisance, including noise, dust, odour and vibration, and the density and nature of the development is compatible to the adjacent dwellings. The residential amenity issues raised by neighbouring residents during the construction process can be dealt with by way of a planning condition, and concerns have been raised in respect of the impact on health and well-being. However, this proposal does allow for the site to integrate into the wider environment and contribute to the wider green infrastructure, which could improve the environment for local residents. So, because it's at the outline stage, we're simply asking whether the site can physically accommodate the 52 dwellings with appropriate landscaping and open space, and the indicative plan demonstrates that it can. The key trees which are identified in the application are retained and the design and layout can be secured at the reserve matters. The site is in flood zone 1. Both the Environment Agency and the lead local flood authority are satisfied that surface water can be managed through SUDs and restricted greenfield rates, and there is no objection. We have had some concerns on heritage, and while the site once formed part of the wider grounds of Sherwood Hall, there's no physical features now on site, and the Conservation Officer raises no objections. And we don't consider that the proposal would harm heritage significance. Finally, the report explains that the conditions are appropriate and necessary. They allow technical matters such as drainage, ecology, construction controls and detailed layouts to be resolved at later stages without undermining the acceptability of the principle in scheme in principle. So in conclusion, we are recommending that the application is granted in accordance with the recommendation and the conditions which are set out in the report.
Thank you for your report, Claire. There may be questions later. But, there are speakers on this item. So first of all, I'd like to invite Marilyn Chomiuk to the lectern. You want to press the middle of your unit, the red light will come on, and then you can deliver your talk. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is not just about 52 houses being built on our field. Loss of habitat for wildlife, loss of amenities for dog walkers and for the children that play on the area when they're off school. It's not good for the insects, squirrels, foxes, rabbits. The trees will be felled to accommodate this thingy. There's really mature trees there that should be stayed and not took down. And then when the schools start open, same as that lady said, the objections about the parking is absolutely ridiculous. Stewart Avenue can't take any more cars because of the way that it's been done. The emergency services, they have a problem when it comes to school opening and school shutting. I've seen buses where the drivers have just left the bus and walked off because they can't get round the bends because the parking is not good enough. Do we really need 52 more houses using an infrastructure which is already overloaded? Most families these days have got 2 working parents, so that means apart from all the school traffic, which I assume there's about 400 children at Abbey Primary, do we really need another 100 cars bombing up and down our streets? When I moved there 13 years ago, it was a quiet, clean residential area, and now it's like a car park. That's about it. Plus, when this first came up about the 52 houses, I had it in the back of my mind. I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but I'd got it that the Duke of Portland actually donated that land where the school was built on. And it was for recreation use or education use, not for houses being built on it. And the 10-year rule where it's not been used, it has been used because the council have felled trees on there that were diseased. So there has been some looking after the field, which means that they shouldn't be able to change the use from recreation and educational to housing. That's it, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at this. It's the first time I've done it.
It's all right, man. I'll just ask members if they've got any questions for you. Do members have any questions of the speaker? Councillor Stendhal?
Thank you, Marilyn. You did very well. You mentioned about trees that had been felled.
Yeah.
So how many trees are left that you believe are going to be felled?
Well,
Or not? You said they were mature trees. So how many in total? 3, 5, 10 more?
I'd say 10 or more. I don't go on the field personally now because my dog doesn't walk that very far. Whereas I used to, he only goes down street and back. So as I say, I've not been on the field, but where the new entrance is going to come off Princess Street onto either Princess Avenue, or Pumpolla Lane, that's where the trees are that will have to go. And they are mature trees.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? No one's indicating. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Ward Councillor, Councillor Angie Jackson. If you want to come up. I don't need to talk you through the recording equipment, but you've got 6 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, colleagues. I'm here on behalf of a group of residents who are asking that you consider refusal or deferral of this application. And you've already heard from that resident that's also asking you to consider refusal. I'd like to pick up actually from where Marilyn left off about ecology. She talked about the insects and the birds and things like that. It is noted in the report that an up-to-date bat survey will be required as part of the conditions. Residents are concerned really about the principle of giving outline planning permission. It's then set up as a principle, and what then happens if the ecology report identifies bats or other species that need to be protected. I'm not saying that I have the answer, but I'm asking committee to consider that matter quite carefully. While we're on that subject, the issue of green space. I accept, as do residents, that this area hasn't been used for many years as a sports pitch. However, it is very well used by many residents for general recreational purposes. The report that you have in front of you records the community's concerns regarding health, well-being, loss of open space and access to nature. I had significant representations from a resident who lived not in Forest Town but on the other side, the Ling Forest side, who felt that it was the only area that he felt safe going to. This gentleman had autistic spectrum disorder and couldn't really travel anywhere else, and was significantly concerned about the impact of the loss of this granted informal facility. I know a lot of people walk their dogs because I had to get an extra bin put up at the entrance to the area because of all the bags that were being collected and left there. The bin is well used, by the way. So I would ask members to consider has the site's qualitative informal green infrastructure value been properly considered in this report? I'm going to also move on now to one of the main reasons why residents are concerned about this development, and that is, as the other lady referred to, the parking and the traffic movement. When the school was moved to its current site many years ago, Notts County Council assured residents that there would be minimal impact on the traffic flow in that area. That turned out to be absolutely not true. The parking and traffic movement in that area is a significant problem. The bus regularly gets stuck. On more than one occasion, children have received minor injuries from moving traffic. Residents have been subject to abuse and antisocial behaviour by parents parking in and around their homes. Now, I appreciate that the entrance to this site is further down from the school. However, 52 dwellings will significantly add to the traffic flow in that area. Recently, we had a new beat team in Forest Town, and the beat team went to have a look at the school parking problems and actually ended up directing the traffic themselves because the bus got stuck. Now, in order to alleviate these problems, the previous county council, the previous administration, worked very hard on a parking alleviation scheme, which they discussed at length with various residents, and there was a very strong proposal put forward. Residents were under the impression that the parking alleviation scheme, and I'll explain what that is in a minute, would come alongside this proposal as either part of or at the same time. Clearly, it hasn't. The parking alleviation scheme would consist of some parking spaces and a turning circle for parents to drop off and pick up. Notwithstanding the fact that residents still don't believe that would alleviate the problems, this parking alleviation scheme is by no means assured. Since the change of administration at the County Council, we've not been able to get any assurance from the current administration that this parking alleviation scheme will go ahead. My ask to you is, why is this development considered acceptable when a parking alleviation scheme was already required, and we're now asking the residents to suffer the traffic movements of another 52 homes? That is one of the significant concerns of residents, and another reason why residents feel that it's appropriate to either defer or refuse this application tonight. think Marilyn's really spoke quite clearly about her concerns, and I echo those concerns on behalf of a number of other residents. I do believe that the parking and the traffic movement is a significant material matter that you should take into account, particularly when you put it alongside the fact that the parking alleviation scheme seems to have gone rather quiet when you consider your decision tonight. I understand that it's outline planning permission and that most of these things are due to be picked up through conditions as we go forward. Are you assured as a committee that those conditions are strong enough to be applied to alleviate the concerns that are in the report that you've read, that the resident that spoke has explained, and that I've echoed here tonight? So that's my ask of you. Consider those very carefully before you make your decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Do members have any questions of Councillor Jackson? Councillor Callahan? I have taken advice on the declarations of interest earlier, and Councillor Moxon, you declared an interest, but you said you want to speak. If you'd like to come say your words before withdrawing.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I want to reiterate what Councillor Jackson has just said and the previous lady that's spoken. It is quite well known that on Stewart Avenue, the parking on there around school time is atrocious, quite frankly. It's a real problem. I know people at every school say it's a problem. Well, you've not seen Stewart Avenue. It's a real problem. Fights have broken out, antisocial behaviour, people parking and driving over people's gardens. It just unbelievable. When I was a county councillor, one of the things that I was heavily involved in was pushing forward, trying to get the parking alleviation. And this scheme was to run alongside it because one paid for the other, essentially. So we were told quite early on that there was not enough money in the pot to do a proper parking alleviation scheme, and it would need to be paid for somehow. And this was the way of paying for it, essentially. And so one was supposed to lead to the other. So I was for want of a better word, I was a cheerleader for this project, in that I wanted the parking alleviation scheme, and lesser of two evils, I suppose, was having this housing development built in order to pay for that. So it's really, really disappointing to see that they've got disconnected somehow. There's no sort of nothing in the papers. In fact, the highways comments on the report even allude to this, that they were supposed to be brought at the same time, and they're not. They're no longer connected to each other. And my concern and worry is that they are going to forever be disconnected, and that the parking alleviation scheme won't happen. And if that is the case, then this is just going to make the problem on Stewart Avenue so much worse. Not what I was cheerleading for at all. I was trying to make the problem better, albeit I know it meant building 50-something houses in order to pay for it, but I genuinely was of the belief that this would make things better. And if you don't do the parking alleviation scheme with it, it'll be a whole lot worse. And where will the money disappear to? Just into the Notts County Council black hole, and not get put back into trying to help residents around there who desperately need the help during school time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moxon. The point where you can ask questions of the officer. Do we have any indications? Councillor Swinscoe?
Marion mentioned about the Duke of Portland. Could you give some clarification for that, please?
Thank you, Councillor. I think without being a local historian, I'm afraid I think it sounds like I may be wrong, but there's a case of overlapping concurrent regimes of land transfers happen all the time. They can be whoever's donating the land or whoever's giving them away. It may be subject to restrictive covenants. There may be an intention that in their own desire that the use of land maintains a particular use for the long term. I think I guess the general principle is that land ownership changes, and I guess I don't know when this was, so a significant period of time has moved on since then. And I think that the principle of development has been assessed, and obviously the previous use of the playing field, and that's one of the matters that's been assessed in the planning balance in the report. And I think functionally we can only look at land uses. I can't speak for the Duke of Portland's intentions as to when the land was donated, but I think we can only assess the land use, and it's been disused for 14 years. And I think despite the Sport England objection, that's been weighed up. But anyone else can jump in. But I think it's a fair and a frustratingly general answer. But I think it's the general principle of planning to look at land use.
Councillor Callaghan?
Yeah, on page 17, it says that. Gone off.
Just ask you to stop speaking at the back of it's very loud here. We can hear you. You're not supposed to be talking while the committee is in progress. Okay, Councillor Callaghan.
So, to the officers, it says on page 17 at the bottom, you need a formal landscape strategy and planting design. You need a biodiversity game plan, and the rest. Isn't this normally done when you're putting in for planning? Or is this a bit different?
Those are comments that the neighbouring properties have raised, and those are covered by conditions as part of this report. We don't consider that we need those documents at this stage, given that it's outlined, because we don't know where the dwellings are going to go, so we don't know where any green space or anything like that's going to go. So yeah, it is entirely normal for them to be secured by condition and sought at a later stage.
Thank you.
So Hammerley.
Claire, page 15, paragraph B, refers to antisocial behaviour within the application site. It says the area suffers from antisocial behaviour such as drug taking by groups of young people, setting of fires and fly tipping. So have you consulted Notts Police about this, or you got comments from the police?
Yeah, sorry, I can see the comments. I'm just checking if we've consulted the police. We haven't got a consultee response from the police. But there was no evidence of the antisocial behaviour on site when I did my visit. And if the site is developed with housing, you'd expect that that would be a matter that would be, yeah.
I think, yeah, that just to clarify, that's obviously an objection that's come in where you're reading from. I personally don't think it's that necessary to consult the police on this. In fact, I would have thought that it's an existing problem. And my mind tells me that if the land is put to some use, it probably would alleviate the problem, because I think well, I don't know for definite because I don't know the area and don't know what's going on there in terms of antisocial behaviour, but it could be the case that it's because the land has no use and people are getting in there and just using it. as and when. So yeah, so I mean, in terms of planning, it's better to give land a use because it formalises a bit more, and you would then hope from then that the issues in terms of antisocial behaviour would decline.
Yeah. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. I think you might have already answered my question partially in here, but I'd just like the clarity anyway. So condition 13 mentions about an arboricultural method statement and tree protection plan being submitted and approved in writing. So I think what I'm looking for clarity on is we mentioned potential felling of trees there. That study, and I'm guessing this is outlined, so as you've said, those houses aren't decided yet. Would that potentially impact where the houses would be placed depending upon the outcome of that study and whether or not those trees were likely to be felled or not felled?
So that condition will protect the trees that are to be retained. There are going to be trees removed, but those are the ones that are inside the site. I think I've got that Google image. You see, you can see where there was some tennis courts and there's some trees at either side of them, so they're going to be removed. But it's the tree report sets out that they're of poor quality. The mature trees and the ones of a higher category are being retained as part of the proposal.
Thank you. I just had one more question, if that's okay. So it's been mentioned a few times in regards to the parking and parking alleviation that was potentially in there. Is that something that could be considered as a condition at this stage, or would that need to be decided at a further stage once the outline planning permission was granted, or not?
We can't condition that the parking alleviation scheme comes forward as part of this scheme because it doesn't. This development doesn't. It doesn't result. The parking alleviation scheme is not needed as a result of this development. It's already needed because of existing situations. So it'd be planning conditions have to be reasonable and necessary, and because it doesn't arise as a result of that, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Any further questions of the officer? Councillor Stendhal.
Thank you. Yes, it's been mentioned about the trees, so one of my questions on that's already been answered. But Councillor Jackson mentioned about the bats. Could the officers please explain what the process will be should bats be found on the site, please?
A bat survey supporting this application, which demonstrates, well, which shows that there's a bat roost in one of the trees. So that tree is being retained as part of the proposal, but further bat surveys will take place as part of the reserve matters, and if there are further bats found, then we would have to deal with that at that point and seek to retain those trees too.
Just for clarity, if you look at condition 17, Councillor Stendhal, that actually requests that the updated surveys are submitted with the reserve matters application, and that survey, if bats are then found, then it needs to also detail the necessary mitigation measures.
Wanted it explaining in committee.
Thank you, Jean. Any further questions? Just going to ask Paul to come in on the clarity of the parking alleviation scheme, because I was going to ask the same question that Councillor Stevenson asked, and the response was, okay, this is a separate thing. But we did hear from former county councillor that the whole scheme was put forward in order to pay for this parking alleviation scheme. So I'd just like Paul to come in on it and a bit more clarity before we move into debate.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I understand from what Councillor Moxon said that previously, possibly at pre-application stage, mention had been made of this parking alleviation scheme. All I can say is that this current application has not been submitted in connection with or tied in any way with that proposed scheme. The County Council is free to put in whatever parking scheme it chooses to. The application before members tonight is not contingent on any such scheme. That's not how the applicant has presented it. And officers, I understand, do not consider any parking measures outside the site are needed. There's a general principle of where there are pre-existing problems in a location, be it noise, parking, whatever it may be. It cannot be, an obligation can't be imposed on a future applicant to make good a pre-existing problem. What members need to consider is whether this development would make pre-existing problems, in this case parking, worse to a degree which would justify refusing the application. Now, I don't believe there's been any evidence presented to justify such an approach. Parking, unfortunately, is a problem in many parts of the country, and unfortunately, new residents means new cars, means new traffic. That's unfortunately part of development, and the government accepts that. And unfortunately, there's very limited policy justification for refusing a scheme due to additional traffic, due to additional parking. And unfortunately, the Highways Authority hasn't raised any objection on those grounds.
Thank you for that bit of clarity, Paul. Do I have a proposer, Councillor Hammersley, second Councillor Swinscoe? Can we move into debate mode then? Do any councillors wish to make further comment? Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, and thanks for answering the questions. I think that gives some clarity on things, and it's clear that parking's an issue. But as been mentioned, I don't foresee this adding to the parking problem, likely the traffic problem. But the reality is there's going to be a new estate there. That's where they're going to park. It'd be unlikely that they would move off their estate and park just around the corner. So I can't see from that point of view that that's going to have the impact. And so I think at this stage we need to approve the outline and see what comes forward in terms of further studies and the detail of it. So we can assess it properly at that stage. But at this stage, I think it is a development that looks fine to me so far.
Wishing to comment? Councillor Tempest Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me that this is 52 houses that are going to be built and improve a pretty rough piece of land that's just been used for dog walking. And it's brilliant that people get it to use for dog walking, but had the county council done its job properly, it would be fenced off and it wouldn't be used in any case. I don't see that there's any access by foot onto the land to the north and the east because there's two schools there, so it's fenced off. And I don't therefore see that it, just as Councillor Stevens said, the existing parking problems on Stewart Avenue, which sound horrendous, as they are in many primary schools, I suppose, up and down in every village, in every country, I suppose, in every county, I suppose. For me, it seems like a good use of the land. There are other playing fields nearby, Kingsway, Queensway, Forest Town Arena, etc. I think it's a good use of land. Had the because it would have already been used properly for something, whether a proper playing field or built on, as is proposed. I'll be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tempest Mitchell. Any further comment? No. I'm prepared to take this to the vote then. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Thank you. That's 8 for, no abstentions, no against. That's carried. Thank you. So, plan application reference 2025-0149, outline application for residential development up to 52 dwellings, the former Sherwood Hall School playing fields, Stewart Avenue, Forest Town, has been granted planning permission, outline planning permission, including point of access with conditions and subject to the signing of an section 106 legal agreement. Thank you. Move on the agenda to item 5, which is planning application reference 2025-0648, change of use from C3 dwelling house to a class C2 residential institution for 6 young adults with learning disabilities and autism. A rear extension and conversion and extension of an existing garage to accommodate additional sleeping accommodation. Crow Hill Lodge, 15 Crow Hill Drive, Mansfield. Can I invite the officer to make a report, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. So this application site relates to a non-designated heritage asset, Crow Hill 15 Crow Hill Rise. It's situated not far from the Mansfield Council offices. It's to the east of Chesterfield Road South and to the west of Woodhouse Road, approximately 0.5 kilometres to the north of Mansfield Town Centre. The main key planning constraints are largely limited. It's the size of the site is 0.2 hectares. It's within the the Crow Hill Conservation Area, and all the trees on the site are protected. That's for relevant constraints. That's pretty much it. So next slide, please. So the main use of the application and the target, I guess, users of the site. So it's not unlike some of the other items we've seen here. This one is for young adults, not for children. So it's the high need care, predominantly on a one-to-one basis. Each user would effectively have would have quite a large space, so they'd have their own room, living area, sensory room, really akin in size to almost to a 2-bedroom flat. So and there would shift rotas with a registered manager during the day. So it's a relatively high need site. I would imagine the level of independence would be relatively limited. So you can see as far as structural alterations would go, there would be a single story rear extension would be expanded, and the garage would be converted to accommodate for the users effectively. The layout is somewhat novel in the sense that it's not a single built envelope, so it's not all contained within the house. That is deliberate in terms of the principle of development. There's been support from the senior commissioning officer at Nottinghamshire Adult Social Care. Some of the nature of it, that there would be common occurrences of on-street parking, and as you've seen from the photos, where that does occur, it would be likely limited, and there are some TROs controlling parking on that street. So we've not got concerns in terms of the impact on highway safety, subject to the conditions in the report. That kind of just an indicative. This is broadly comparable to what I've observed on site. There is some capacity on the street for parking overspill, but the applicant has said that on another scheme they have only half their staff drive. That does seem to map well. We can't predict the behaviour of future staff. The nature of the staffing type doesn't mean that we wouldn't expect every single member of staff to drive. So based on the probability, there was no evidence that the impact on highway safety would be unacceptable. As far as impact on residential amenity, the site, generally speaking, it's 2,000. The total site area is 2,000 square meters, so it's a large plot. I think as far as what for both the users and the existing residents, it's a very generous amount of space. We've seen a lot of uses where, I mean, just the garage in itself is the size of a standard residential bungalow. So in that sense, we didn't feel there was an impact on existing residents. As far as risk to the future residents, we have a condition on there recommending details of site security measures to be provided prior to the first use of the development. That's in response to the comments from Nottinghamshire Police. There are some types of crime that are elevated based on their data, but it's typically things like burglary and cycle theft. It doesn't relate to violent crime. I think generally speaking, that evidence hasn't been provided, and I guess generally speaking, the level of number of staff on the site would provide a much greater level of security than a typical residential use with adults or children with disabilities. So that finding's not really been supported. Next slide, please. If there are any more, I think it's good. There was a photo somewhere showing the site. As far as other considerations, the site was subject to a biodiversity net gain assessment. The amount of because of the size of the site, it's had to provide a 10% net gain, which has been achieved on site. There'll be a number of trees planted as a result of that. The amended plans did originally show one tree to be removed. Because of the reduction in scale of the garage, that should now be retained in as an arboricultural method statement, which has been included as part of the approval. So as far as impact on biodiversity is considered to be acceptable. Apart from that, there's been no technical or statutory consultee objections, and the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We've got a speaker on this, Andrew Barnes, the applicant agent. If you like to just press the centre of your console there, red light, you've got 4 minutes, Andrew. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. I'll keep it quite short because the planning office has just gone through most of the things that I was going to say. I'm representing Godfrey Care. I'm one of the directors. We specialise in looking after young adults with learning disabilities and or autism. We've worked very closely with the Commissioner for Learning Disabilities in Nottinghamshire, as the planning officer just mentioned. We think this is a fantastic property. It's got lots of garden space. It's in a really nice area close to Mansfield Centre. So it would be a lovely place for the individuals we support to call home. Like the officer said, it's very spacious. Everybody has their own areas. The main reason for me coming and speaking today really was in case anybody's got any questions around the operational side of what we do. There won't be young adults living there with a criminal background. We don't specialise in forensics. It is all learning disabilities and autism. So yeah, if anybody's got any questions around the operations of what we do, I'd be more than happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Andrew. Do members have any questions? Got Councillor Jackson.
I've just made a note. What would be the age range of the you'll be accommodating?
So we 18 to 25 is our normal age range. We try and move people into a home who are of a similar age, so with time they could build friendships and do activities together. Obviously they've kind of got there's communal kitchens and communal lounge, but they have all got their own space. So in the first instance, we do try and work with health and the local authority to move people in who are within a similar age group. No problem.
Councillor Moxon. Vandal. The IT is falling apart, I can tell you that.
Thank you for that. Almost forgot what the question was now. Oh, yes. What have you done in terms of the local neighbours and residents in engaging with them prior to the this planning process?
We haven't actually had discussions with the neighbours. Once we get started, we do a lot of work with the neighbours. We normally have an open day before anybody moves in and invite everybody. When we have in the summer, when we have barbecues and stuff with the residents, we always invite all the neighbours. And where we do have other homes, we do always have really good relationships with the neighbours. I think when the planning first goes in for this type of thing, obviously parking is always a bit of a concern and the staff coming and going, but I think because it falls under an institution, they can be worried about the individuals who might live there and are they going to have a criminal background. So yeah, I mean, in the lead up to it, we will be speaking to neighbours and giving them the reassurances and the manager normally goes around and introduces themselves.
Oxon.
Sorry, if I could just come back on that one. Great that you do that afterwards and that you interact with the local residents. Would it not be more prudent to do it before and during the process rather than letting local residents sort of fears kind of run away with them as to what's going to happen? You know, they get like an echo chamber of not knowing any information, and it sort of it almost like it exacerbates the problem rather than, you know, you're doing a great job in trying to resolve it at the end, but if you did it right at the beginning, you might have better outcomes and you know the residents might even welcome it.
Yeah, completely take that on board. It's a very fair comment, and yeah, completely right. I think it would be very beneficial to go around and do that, and it could, like you say, stop us all having to bring it to committee.
You're putting it back together then, Richard. Are there any other questions? Councillor Stender?
Oops, we're all falling apart. Look, I keep losing that. Page 62 of the report does talk about the parking, and it does say there is a shortfall on it, and it does say that based on the 6 bedrooms, so there'll be 6 tenants and 7 members of staff. I understand that some of the residents might need 2 carers to look after whatever they need to do. How do you foresee the residents of 6 of them needing 2? Would it ever go to 12 members of staff? Would they all need 2? How would you work your operations around that?
We've never had that before, and it would be quite difficult to manage 6 residents who all needed 2 to 1, because if 6 residents did need 2 to 1, they are quite challenging individuals. Obviously the referral process, when we get a pen portrait of all the details of the individuals, and our management team and operational teams will go out and assess that individual, we would be refusing referrals if everybody was looking at needing that level of care. It's a lot of people to recruit for one site as well. As the planning officer did say, so some people could be 2 to 1, but then some individuals could be less than 1 to 1, so they might only need 3 or 4 hours a day of 1 to 1. Basically, what our main intention is to lower people's level of care. So when they first come to us, if they need 1 to 1 care or 2 to 1 care, we would immediately be trying to lower that level of care, and then eventually being able to move on to supported living, where they've obviously got their own tenancy agreement, very low levels of care, they can access the community. Everything we do in our care planning is about reducing that level of 1 to 1. Sorry, I'm going on a bit here, but to answer your question, we wouldn't move 6 people into the care home that all needed 2 to 1.
Councillor Swanscombe,
Just answered my question in the previous one. Thank you.
Councillor Tempest Mitchell.
Thank you. I see that you've submitted a management plan to Nottinghamshire Police and probably to planning. Can you just give us a little bit of background in relation to how that management plan comes together and what experience does the company have in running similar sorts of facilities?
So with experience, we have I think it's 12 similar residential homes that are very similar to this one. We opened one in Beeston in the middle of last year that's been very successful. The individuals that have moved there have come on leaps and bounds. It's incredible to see. As I just said, their one-to-one has hugely reduced, and people who weren't going out and accessing the community and being involved in activities have really flourished and are out there doing those things. We also have similar homes in Burton-on-Trent and in Chesterfield. As regards to the management plan, is the specifics around the management plan itself? Is it kind of the day-to-day management of the home?
I was just thinking more about how it comes together and your expertise and experience that you have.
Yeah.
Has that informed the management plan? Obviously, it's specific to this place.
Right. Yeah.
But your experience seems quite wide.
Yeah, we have a full in-house PBS clinical team. We employ learning disability nurses. We employ psychologists. We have a vast array of experts within the company. We really do see ourselves as specialists and provide a very bespoke and niche model for individuals. We tailor each living space specifically to the person who's going to be moving in. So we will start receiving, the commissioner's already working on referrals with the Transforming Care team within health. We're already looking at pen portraits. We'll bespoke each apartment specifically around people's sensory needs and what works for them, what doesn't. You know, they might not need doors in certain places. They like open plan, or they do like doors and certain things. You know, it's everything is very bespoke to the individuals to make these things work.
Thank you. Councillor Coxhead.
Yeah, hi, you all right?
Yes, good, thank you.
Yeah, so having a sort of place, as you've described, coming to Mansfield in the way that you've described the people that will access the service that you've got, seems to be very comforting to me, because I worked within education, but with the mild end of
yeah.
what you, and my concern's always been is that they're not ready at 18 to go out into the world of work and the wilderness of streets and towns and everything else. And you know, knowing now that we've got something like this coming is quite exciting, and I will be fully supporting this.
Thank you.
And it'd be good to get to see something like this, you know, get invited up when you get established or nearly there.
Are there any more questions of the agent? Nope. No, you're not, sir. Sorry. Right, thank you, Andrew. So, do members have any questions of the officer? Councillor Tempest Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the management plan, really. Have you seen it? Is it acceptable to you? Is it acceptable to Nottinghamshire Police in terms of the security of the residents? Because they're probably more likely to be victims of crime rather than committing crime. And does that also cover security that might alleviate some concerns that residents have?
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's condition 9. there's a security measures condition. I think as far as the management plan was submitted, I think there's not any concerns that it's not sufficient. It's also beyond just the consideration for the planning authority. It's also a requirement, I think, of the CQC and Ofsted, or not Ofsted. I think it's mainly the CQC for adults, but I think it's that they have to produce a management plan, and that wouldn't just be reviewed by us. There's no indication to me that it's not acceptable. I think there's been a condition that's translated into a condition for security measures, but I think as the management plan was, I think, as I say, the thing we can, to my recollection, we did reconsult on, and there's been no concerns raised. Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to ask questions of the officer? No. Councillor Callaghan.
Not actually a question, but it is that actually very comprehensive risk assessments will have been carried out anyway. So I think that alleviates some of the things about what we're putting in place, because it will already be in place. And I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. Could I have a proposer? Councillor Coxhead, seconder, Councillor Callaghan. Anyone wishing to comment? Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, I want to say that I think this is a really exciting aspect. When in my previous career, I worked in the NHS, and I managed a unit for learning difficulty and additional needs, and there was a massive lack of provision for them when they were coming out of hospital. So it's really reassuring to know that places like this are popping up and popping up in residential areas and with close access to town. So I think we should all be really excited about this. And as Councillor Cox has said, it would be really nice if an invitation to visit could be extended at some point to appropriate people. That would be ever so nice. So if you could on to the, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, just a quick one, just to convey how well the agent came across in explaining how it's going to work, what they do. When I was younger, I had a friend in a similar place, and we did get to visit sometimes, and it was amazing what sort of facilities they had. In fact, I was quite jealous as a child because they had quite good provision. So yeah, fully in support of it. The property looks amazing for the type of youngsters they're going to have in there. I can't see any drawback from it really. It's great. So yeah, fully in support. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to comment? Councillor Tempest Mitchell.
Thanks, Chair. I think when we look at these applications, we need to see it from both perspectives. So we see it from the local residents, and obviously from the applicant and the residents who are moving in to the building itself. From the perspective of local residents, I'm sure that there are lots of concerns. Councillor Moxon always asks the same question, and he's right in doing so. Have you consulted with the local residents? And the answer came back from Andrew that no, but we probably should have. And I think that's really important, because actually this is a fantastic development. And I think the local residents, knowing all the facts and knowing the expertise of the company, might actually be quite relieved to know a little bit more in advance and think, actually, this might be good for the area, rather than just an old house with 2 or 3 people living in it, who don't add much to the area, whereas these young people could add lots of diverse experience to other residents in the area. I think that house is wasted if not used for something like this. So I'll be absolutely supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to bring a comment in about this situation.
Members can just be reminded that pre-consultation with residents before they submit the planning application isn't relevant as part of determining the application.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense what you're saying, but it isn't a relevant planning condition from No, but you know, we've spoke about it at length tonight, and I can get the sentiment of what people think, and I agree with the sentiment, but in terms of actual planning issue, it's not something that we would expect the applicant to have had to have done. Councillor Swinscoe?
I think we're all aware that it's not part of the planning process, but time again, we've had people who have come up, you know, and the neighbours are upset, they don't know what's happening. I think it's just good practice and it's courtesy, just to consult with the neighbours, just to explain what they're going to set their minds at rest so that they've got some, you know, so they can be reassured as to what's actually happening. Thank you.
Other comments? So could I move to the vote, please, by show of hands? All those in favour of this application, please show. Any abstentions? Any against? Thank you very much. That's a unanimous decision. So, plan application reference 2025-0648, change of use from a C3 dwelling house to Class C2 residential institution for 6 young adults with learning disabilities and autism, rear extension and conversion, an extension to existing garage to accommodate additional sleeping accommodation. Crowhill Lodge, 15 Crowhill Drive, Mansfield, has been approved, subject conditions. Thank you. To agenda item 6, which is plan application reference 2025-0124 full, proposed residential development of 31 number residential dwellings, the site of the former Hermitage Mill, Hermitage Lane, Mansfield. Could I invite the officer to make the report, please? Present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So just prior to the presentation, there are a number of updates to the conditions. So I'll just have to run through these before doing the main presentation. So they primarily relate to the triggers of when information has to be submitted, because it's a fairly complicated site in terms of constraints. So we wanted to make sure that the conditions accurately reflect the state of the development site and when information has to be submitted. So if I I'll try and run through these. I'm not going to read the whole conditions because we'll be here for 20 minutes otherwise. So condition 5 relates to the submission of a construction and environmental management plan. So the trigger of this has been moved to prior to commencement of any development rather than prior to the commencement of any dwelling. This is the same for most of the condition updates. So condition 7 relates to a preliminary risk assessment for contamination. So that condition, the trigger for submission of detail for that condition has been moved to prior to commencement to reduce ambiguity. Condition 8 is the provision of a verification report following contamination assessments. The trigger here has been moved to prior to the occupation of any dwelling rather than the development being brought into use, which was more of a vague term. Condition 11, that relates to site security measures. So the trigger for this one has been moved to prior to the commencement above the damp-proof course level, as opposed to before details of construction. It's a more specific trigger. Condition 17, binder course application. So the trigger has been altered to no development above damp-proof course level. This is due to, it said, prior to any site clearance beforehand. Prior to this application, there was a prior approval granted for the demolition of what remained of the former Hermitage Mill, which had obviously was largely burned down in 2022. So that was also included the removal of most of the hard sanding on the site. So the condition didn't accurately reflect the status of the site as a whole. Condition 18, construction method statement. Wording has been added to ensure parking areas are included, parking access turning areas. This relates to the construction method statement relating to the railway embankment. So it includes all of the land that's adjacent to the main railway. the safety, primarily for safety reasons. Condition 20, so that's again, the trigger's been changed to prior to commencement, not construction of any dwelling. Same reasons before, it's to better reflect the state of the site. Condition 22, it's ecological enhancements, that's just being reworded because again, the wording before was ambiguous, didn't make sense. Condition 27 and 28 both relate to management plans, one for the weir and spillway, one for the management plan of risk from flooding from the mill, Kings Mill Reservoir and the mill pond, both prior to commencement. Condition 29 relates to an archaeological desk space assessment. The word archaeology has been added, again, to reduce ambiguity. Condition 30 relates to construction phase, contamination risk, has also been shifted to prior to commencement of development. Condition 31 has been shifted to prior to commencement as opposed to prior to the construction of any dwelling. So that's primarily it for updates. There's been no change to the rest of the assessment. It's otherwise unchanged. So this application is seeking planning permission for the erection of 31 dwellings, and that includes access and on-site landscaping and creation of new habitat on the south and western side of the site. So the application's undergone initially came in as 21 dwellings, so just to alleviate any confusion if anyone was aware of this site. Now that was increased to 31 following initial consultation comments. So the site is allocated, I think it's H10 or H1N in the Mansfield local plan. So it's an allocated site. It's not the principle of residential development has been established before on this site with 2 previous permissions. The allocation is for 31 units, and that's subject to a number of criteria, which I will talk about in a moment. So access would be to the eastern side of the site off of Hermitage Lane. So as far as the primary site layout goes, the housing mix is for a mixture of 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, and 4 bedroom units. Predominantly, so over 80% of those units are 2 and 3 bedroom houses. Only 2 of the units are 1 bedroom flats, and then the units to the northwestern side of the site are 4 detached 4 bedroom dwellings. Otherwise, the housing mix is unchanged. As far as other material considerations, the density of development was considered acceptable. Impact on residential amenity wasn't considered to be unacceptable. The density and layout of the houses was broadly consistent with what we would expect based on the allocation. There are a number of sort of material issues to go through, but if we just to get a sense as to the sort of the housing types, broadly speaking, they're 2-story dwellings, although some do extend to sort of 2.5 stories. The residential flats extend over roughly 3 stories, or about 11 to 12 meters in height at the tallest point on the southwestern side of the site. The next slide really doesn't show a whole lot else. It's mainly this is just landscape zone area. So there's relevant landscaping primarily on the south and western side of the site. I don't think the presentation includes it, but if we go back to the main sort of site layout, because there are some relevant issues. As far as public objection, public engagement for the application has been very limited. There was only one representation received from a local resident relating to highways, highway safety issues, and that was to do with the access. This was subsequently led to the access to the site being, so the visibility displays, which I'll show in a moment, being increased to 2.4 times 55 meters. That's due to the zones in the area of transition between a 30 and 40 mile an hour zone. That was the only really sort of significant safety issue. Otherwise, it's been minor layout tweaks that had to be made. The sufficient on-site parking's achieved sufficient. There's the internal tracking layout was considered sufficient for bin lorries, emergency vehicles. That's been accommodated. So as far as highway safety, the development was considered to be acceptable, and no further concerns were raised. There's also been there's been input, or one of the concern it was raised by a third party, which relates to noise impacts. So just to the south of the River Mourne, on the other side of the landscaping embankment. So just where the cursor is now, there's a 20 megawatt gas fired turbine, which obviously provides, obviously at times when the grid requires it, will generate electricity from natural gas. That has so that the concern was effectively that when the development's occupied, we did further consultation with environmental health and requested for a further noise assessment to ensure that there wasn't undue restriction placed on the gas-fired turbine operator, and also just to ensure there wasn't an impact on the amenity of future residents. That was considered acceptable, and when I've been on site multiple times, the main thing you can hear is the weir. There's a significant separation distance and significant boundary screening. The only condition recommended was additional information on ventilation. It's a technical noise modelling requirement and needs to ensure that ventilation within houses is acceptable. It's effectively mitigation requires on windows being able to be closed, and obviously you want to make sure that the standard of ventilation to dwellings is appropriate. So subject to that, there's been no objection for environmental health. In terms of, I guess, the main considerations that have been subject to various consultation responses, so from Environment Agency, primarily, but also from our own ecologist, Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, it's the demolition of, and you'll see this in some of the site photos. So the demolition of the mill allowed for quite a bit of hard standing to be removed, and that also in tandem led to some vegetation being removed, which in itself is not best practice, but it also doesn't require planning permission. So the current status of the site is functionally so it's derelict, with some materials being stored on the site. That's not inconsistent with the former use of the site was industrial. So although there are materials being stored on the site, that's, again, it's not a planning issue, so to speak. That was the reason we wanted to make sure the triggers made sense, was because there was some ambiguity as to whether the development commenced based on my site visit. That's not the case, but it's something that we had to make sure was reflected in the triggers. The surrounding, obviously, to the western side of the site and to the south, they've both got significant ecological interest. So the site clearance has led to a significant need to create habitat buffers both along the southern and western side. So particularly a 10-metre buffer on the western side of the mill pond. That's what, as you can see in the photos now. As far as risks, there's a significant number of conditions which, if any in questions, I can pick up on any of those if necessary. Mainly to mitigate both flood risk, contamination of the mill pond, but primarily because of the land levels flowing towards the River Mourne. It's the habitat buffers needed to effectively ensure the development doesn't have an unacceptable impact on that. The development does achieve a 10% biodiversity net gain, but that does require some off-site units to be secured, primarily because the site's a high baseline, although we didn't consider that to be unacceptable, primarily because of they are creating a significant amount of habitat on site, which will need to be legally secured, which is why in the head of terms for the Section 106 agreement, there's a £3,990 obligation that has to be agreed. That's a standard requirement. That subject to that, and the other conditions, again, biodiversity was considered acceptable. There has been also significant back and forth with the Environment Agency on flood risk, not to do with not in the sense of fluvial flood risk. That there's a small area of the southern part of the site which is in flood zone 2, that is subject. There's been mitigation with increased floor levels, which has effectively moved out all of the plots out of being at risk of fluvial flooding. When you look at the 1 in 100-year design life of the development, there's two conditions on management plans for the mill pond, management of the weir and spillway. That's primarily, I believe, a separate issue, but mainly the mill pond. To manage any risk from flooding, and also the Kingsmill Reservoir, which is approximately 500 metres to the west of the site. it's in a difficult grey area because some of it is managed by the Environment Agency and Ashfield District Council, so there's limited power that we have to deal with this, but we have conditions that are consistent with the previous full planning consent that was granted in 2022 to ensure that these risks can be mitigated to the maximum ability they're able to be. Obviously noting the sites allocated for housing and the risk was considered to be very low. So I think that's, as I say, primarily the case. That subject to all the conditions recommended. The development isn't considered to either increase the risk of flooding elsewhere and is considered to be safe in planning terms, noting that the remit that the planning is able to consider. The only other element, really, I guess, in terms of planning obligations is that obviously the application was subject to a viability assessment, which was submitted alongside the application. So this looked at obviously the ability to deliver the requested obligations. That basically demonstrated that the development was unviable if we secured any Section 106 matters. Basically the only thing, so what we've included obviously beyond management company and the B&G requirement, which is a statutory obligation, there's no way around it, so we have to secure the obligation there. We are including a review mechanism which would review the obligations at the time of sale if the viability position changed. That's the same approach that was taken on the Rock Valley site. It is obviously you have to assess the absence of those contributions in the planning balance as to whether the delivery of housing and the bringing of a derelict site back into use outweighs the absence of those. The planning allocation only lists off-site obligations. I think it's for the Oakham and Hermitage local nature reserves. So the weighting of this, obviously, that does carry negative weight in the planning balance, but because they're standard obligations, so it goes on a per unit basis, there's the level of harm attributed to that was limited and is outweighed by the material considerations in favour of the development. So in terms of the overall balance of policy, it's largely policy compliant, although there are a lot of obviously technical constraints that have to be balanced, and they've largely achieved that subject to the conditions outlined in the report. So the recommendation, subject to the 106, the heads of terms and the Section 106 obligations and conditions, is to grant planning permission, although I do believe there might be other updates that may want to be added alongside this. Thank you.
Thank you for that thorough report then, and for updating the attached conditions. Before we get questions from members, I'd just like to bring Claire in to make a further comment.
Sorry, mine won't be as long, but it's just one additional condition to add that's been missed off, that's been noted. So it's relating to existing and proposed ground levels. So would read along the lines of no above ground work shall commence until details of existing and proposed ground levels and proposed finished floor levels of the buildings have been submitted to and approved in writing by the LPA. The development thereafter shall be undertaken in accordance with the approved details. So the recommendation is also subject to that condition.
Thank you, Claire. Do members have any questions of the officer? Councillor Jackson.
A lot of running and walking around there, and there's quite a lot of footpaths. Does this development impact on any of those public footpaths, Timberland Trail, for example, Bleak Hills Lane? Does it have any adverse impact?
Thank you, Councillor. No. So the Timberland Trail is just where Phil's running the cursor now. So that runs so it's on the south side of the Mourne. So it's not impacted at all by that. There's also a path that leads through to, in my report I called it Kingswood Drive. I should have called it Kings Lodge Drive. Sorry about that typo. So the one to the north, that's also unimpacted. There is on the definitive rights of way map, there is one to the northwest, and that's currently complete. So just to the northwest of the site where the private drives to the 4-bedroom detached dwellings are, that is formally a path, but it doesn't seem to lead to anywhere, and the site's currently completely inaccessible. So obviously I guess in principle that could be reopened, and one of the things we had to weigh up was whether that would have any detrimental impact to the amenity of residents on those dwellings, but it's a shared private drive in the terms of it's the whole site's not for adoption. So obviously the whole site is technically a private road, but so it would still be a road where vehicles could, you know, things like emergency vehicles and bin lorries would still be able to reach and collect waste. So there's to answer your question is that there's no rights of way that exist within the site that would be impacted.
Councillor Callaghan.
Yeah, just for my clarification. So the applicant is Walker Homes. Is Walker Homes the applicant that built on the former metal box site? Yeah. So for me, obviously they entered into a 106 agreement and then currently did not pay any 106. Are we sure that we're going to get 106 this time?
I think that this was the calculus of the report was we've got a review mechanism in place that we recruit an independent viability assessor to look at the financials of the report, and there's no obligate beyond the management of the habitat management and monitoring plan fee. There are no obligations to be secured. There is a review mechanism which, if the viability position improves, we would seek to claw back obligations, but that would be contingent upon the final sales values of the properties boosting the viability of the site, and that's undertaken by an independent assessor. So it's not something that we as the planning authority look at in terms of the technical financial costs that go into it, other than the fact I think there was a large number of abnormal costs on this, which has driven the costs up, is my understanding. But so it's one of those things that you have to weigh negatively, but I think you've got to look at the number of houses, the policy allocation, and then weigh that against the delivery of housing and the bringing back into use of a derelict site. And I think the calculus is that the planning balance weighs in favour of the scheme rather than against it. So I hope that answers your question.
It does answer it, but don't satisfy it. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to ask a question? No? Do I have a proposer? This Councillor Hammersley, seconder, Councillor Jackson. Anyone wishing to comment in debate mode? Councillor Stendhal.
Chairman, this is where three footpaths come together: the Bleak Hills Trail, the Mourne Valley Trail, and the Timberland Trail. And now on that particular site, there aren't any particular footpaths, affected. The only comment that I've got, and I want to thank Dan very much for taking the time to go through this in depth with me today, as I was asked on Friday last off to stand in today for Councillor Answer. And the only thing that concerns me is in condition 4, it isn't clear to me that a wheel wash facility should be in place. Now, there was concerns when they were clearing this site that on the highway there was a lot of debris, clay, soil and water running onto the road, and I just feel that we should clarify in condition 4 that a wheel wash facility should be in place for what is deposited on the highway. Apart from that, I don't have any other comments, Chairman. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to comment? No. Can I move to a vote then, please? All those in favour, please show. Any abstentions? Any against? No, thank you. So that is unanimous. So, planning application reference 2025-0124 full. Proposed residential development of 31 number residential dwellings, site of the former Hermitage Mill, Hermitage Lane, Mansfield, is granted planning permission with conditions, and the additional condition reported by Claire. I don't know if we can note the wheel wash situation at 4, yeah?
Yeah, we can look at that and just
Look at that. Thank you. So that's approved. Move on to agenda item 7. which is appeal decisions for the 2nd of March to the 29th of March 26. We normally just note these, but I am going to read this one out. I'll not bore you for too long, but this was a detached outbuilding to be used as a garden room office on 14 Reeth Close, Warsop. The planning committee refused planning permission on the 3rd of September 25. Decision being that development has a significant adverse impact on the living conditions of existing and future occupiers of the adjacent property by way of an overbearing impact, contrary to policy P7 of the adopted local plan. The appeal decision was allowed. The inspector reports the retrospective outbuilding, although visible from number 75, is acceptable in amenity terms, given its modest scale, setback position, flat roof design and partial screening. It is not considered to be overbearing, does not result in an undue sense of enclosure, and maintains acceptable outlook for the occupiers of number 75. And as such, it complies with policy P7 of the Mansfield District Local Plan. Neighbour concerns have been considered. Overlooking can be addressed through obscure glazing and fixed shut side window. The outbuilding is of a typical domestic scale and appearance and is appropriately accommodated within the garden without appearing overdeveloped. Other matters raised, including permitted development rights, structural issues, vegetation and property values, are not material to the decision. The appeal is therefore allowed and planning permission is granted. Can we note that? Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. And finally, agenda item 8, which is the appendices of human rights and use classes. Can I again ask for a show of hands that you've all read that, please? Thank you. It's unanimous. So that concludes business for tonight. Thank you very much for your attendance. We've reached the correct decisions on all items, and have a safe journey home. Thank you. I had to read that one.